It is a very special time of year here in the Midwest. Lamb cake season. I'm going to share with you my take on my grandma's classic recipe. The first thing we have to do is prep our pan. This is my grandma's old lamb cake mold. We have the front and the back. It's in two pieces. And the way that I prep it is to take some baking spray, and I always do this. When you are spraying a cake pan, I do it over the sink. My mom taught me this because then you're not getting any overspray on your floor. So that is the front half. And now I'll do the back half. I want to make sure that you're getting into all those little nooks and crannies so that your cake doesn't stick. And then a lot of people coat their cake pans with flour. For this, I actually use sugar because it makes like a beautiful crust on the outside of the lamb. It sounds crazy, but it works. So I'm gonna shake the granulated sugar all over one corner. And this also helps to do it over the sink too, because then any sugar you shake out of the pan won't get all over your floor. Back half, pour the excess into the front half, and see how it's just like, I don't know if you can see that. See how it's just like perfectly coated? And then when it's in the oven, the sugar will crystallize and, like I said, make like this beautiful, beautiful coat. You can use flour. You can use the baking spray with flour. I've used both to great success. This is just like an extra special thing I like to do for this cake. Okay, so now we have both ends sprayed and coated. And I am going to get the pan fully prepped. That way when the cake batter is done, I can just put it in the pan. I'm cutting some baker's twine and I'm laying it on a small cake pan because this pan is two halves, but the cake isn't baked in two halves. It's not like it's baked and then put together. It's like a mold situation. The cake bakes up, so you need to get it to stay together while it's baking. Now, old, like really, really old lamb cake pans are cast iron, and they hold up, or they're heavy enough to be left on their own. Like the back will just sit on the top and it won't move, but this little aluminum pan is not heavy enough, so I add some string, so that way when we put the back on the front, we tie it together, and then when the cake rises, it won't push the back off. So these are prepped, and now we're gonna set them aside. Cake pan is prepped, and now we are doing the dry ingredients. So it's flour. This cake is super simple. Like, it's not a ton of ingredients. It's not a ton of steps, because if it were either of those things, it wouldn't have fit on my arm. So flour, baking powder, and salt. Whisk that together and set it aside. And now this is the one place where I differ from my grandma, is she only used the egg whites. So you're gonna separate the eggs, and she only used the whites, you know, would whip them until peaks formed. I used the white and the yolk to add more moisture and more flavor, but I still do the whole like separating and whipping the egg whites thing. So we have egg whites in a clean, dry mixing bowl, and then our yolks. I have my egg whites on my mixer here, and now I'm just going to whip them until they're like light and white and fluffy, and not super stiff peaks, like a medium stiff peak. And whenever you are whipping egg whites, you want to make sure that the bowl is clean and dry, that there's no oil, fat, no residue of any kind. Same with the whisk. If there's any sort of residue of anything, your egg whites will not whip. And this is how they look when they're nearly done. Okay, and this is how they should look. Like, that's, you know, it's got a little wiggle to it. So the egg whites are whipped, and now we work on the rest of our wet ingredient. Half a cup of shortening, and then we add the sugar. And you're gonna cream this until it's light and fluffy. It starts out looking like this, and it ends looking like this. See how it's increased in volume? So the sugar and shortening are good and whipped. And now we're gonna add the egg yolks. Again, this is an addition that I do that my grandma did not do. But I like that you use the whole egg, and again, just adds more flavor, more moisture. So the egg yolks, and now vanilla. And now we mix that to combine it. And that is what it looks like when it's combined. So then when the egg yolks and vanilla are mixed in, this is just like a standard cake batter. We're gonna start adding our dry ingredients, add about half of them, and mix it up. And I'm pulsing the mixer so that the flour doesn't fly everywhere. So that's added. And now I'm adding room temperature whole milk and mixing that. And then I'm going to scrape the bowl before I add the last bit of dry ingredients. Bowl is scraped, the rest of the dry ingredients. And you want to be very careful not to overmix, because now we're going to fold in those egg whites by hand and just make sure that everything is good and combined. So now we take the whipped egg whites and we fold them in. And I'm not going to be Myra Rose on you. So the way that you fold is you go around and through the center and around and through the center. So you go around and through the center and around and through the center. And you just keep doing that gently until everything is combined. And this part takes a little bit of time, but it's how you keep all of that air in the cake batter. You just slowly keep going, and there you have it, like the most beautiful cake batter. And now we are just going to fill up the front half of the lamb mold. You want to make sure that you are getting all the nooks and crannies in every little bit of this. Okay, so you can see how full it is. And normally this is where my grandma stopped. She put on the back half of the lamb, threw it in the oven. But I am very type A and a perfectionist, so I make sure that I have what I need. Got it. So my grandma's cake was like perfect, and it's always gonna be perfect, and I'm never gonna make it as good because I'm not my grandma, but I have found a few tricks to make this lamb cake a little bit more special and a little bit more structurally sound. So I take toothpicks and I reinforce the ears and the head and the neck with toothpicks. I just lay them in the lamb, so then this will make decorating a lot easier because we won't have to worry about beheading the lamb. My phone ran out of storage and didn't save the last video where I put the back half of the cake pan on and I trussed it all up like it's a little chicken. So I'll just show you what it looks like. Put the back half on, they like snap into each other, but the string is just for extra insurance to make sure that the back won't pop off and you don't lose cake or leak cake batter everywhere. So this is very extra and probably totally not necessary, but my grandma's, the head of the lamb cake would tend to be burnt because the back half of the lamb cooks so much slower than the front half. It's much smaller. So to avoid that and to kind of mitigate the issue, I take some foil and I wrap the head of the lamb up in foil. So this just means that it's going to insulate it and make it take a little while longer to bake so that it's more in line with the back half of the lamb. Now it's not going to be perfect. Like the head will always be done first, and you obviously want to bake it until the body is done, but this helps a lot. And then again, because I'm extra, I take even more foil and I wrap it just around the ears so that the ears have another layer of protection. And then that's what it looks like. So he's got the little helmet and then the little ear caps. I know it looks crazy. Also, he's face down so that if for some reason the batter doesn't rise, it's not rising to the back half. So this way, with the batter, like the lamb is face down and the batter's in there, so he's gonna have all of those facial details like the nose and everything and his little legs, they're all gonna come out the way that they should. So now we are ready to bake. Okay, moment of truth, she's still hot. It's been about 10-15 minutes since it came out of the oven, so the bottom pan is cool enough to touch. The lamb mold is still very warm. I did have a little seepage. The string, if I didn't have the string, it would be worse. Like it would everywhere. It's a little overflow on the bottom. I'm okay with. It means that like the batter hit the top of the mold and came out. Moment of truth. I'm gonna take his little ear protectors and helmet off. So I treat this cake just like I do a bundt cake. Like when I take a bundt cake out of the oven, I let it sit for about 10 minutes and then I release it from the pan. So it's been about 10-15 minutes and it's still very, very warm to the touch, but theoretically it should come out. See how clean that is? It's beautiful and perfect. And now I'm just gonna let this cool on this clean cookie sheet until it is room temperature, and then we will decorate. Okay, so while we wait for the lamb to cool, we are gonna make and prep all of the decorations for it. I already have jelly beans. We're gonna make the frosting, but first we're gonna make the Easter grass, which is what the little lamb sits on. My grandma, she always used to coat the cake in coconut so it would like look like wool. I prefer just frosting it, but I still like to use coconut to make Easter grass. So I'm gonna take some shredded coconut flakes and add green food coloring. So that is all done. It looks just like the Easter grass that I used to get in Easter baskets. So I love that. And now we are gonna make frosting. I always make my mom's cream cheese frosting for this. It's the best of the best. As always, when you're adding the powdered sugar, like when you're adding flour, pulse the mixer. Frosting is done. Before we start decorating, I'm gonna color just a little bit of the frosting so that I can make a face. This is totally extra. You don't have to do this. My grandma used to do jelly bean eyes and a jelly bean nose, and she would make a jelly bean collar. I like to get a little bit more like whimsical and like cartoony with my decorations. So I have pink and brown. I use pink for the mouth and brown for his little eyelashes. Lamuel is cool, and so now we are going to decorate him. So I have my serving tray, and I like to just do a little bit of parchment and stick the parchment to the tray. Use a little frosting as glue, and then I take Lamuel and I put a little line of frosting along the bottom to also be like glue. And this will help him stay upright. Okay, so now that he is secured and kind of glued on, I'm gonna start decorating him. Now you wanna be careful because it is delicate and it's not easy frosting a cake that's standing up, but because we used those toothpicks, we know that he's pretty sturdy. I always start with his little face and just spread some frosting on. Okay, so real talk, I was hating the way that tip was looking, so I switched it. I just really wasn't liking that, so I scraped it off. We're gonna restart his wool. And you totally don't have to pipe on the frosting. You can just spread it on if you want. You can do like what my grandma did and just coat him in coconut if you love coconut. Make it your own. Now I have what is called in bakery and pastry hot hands. My hands are always hot. Like I don't have cold clammy hands. I have like hot hands. I'm always melting things, and this also applies to frosting when it's in piping bags. So I do it in small batches, and as soon as it's getting warm, pop it in the fridge, take a break, do whatever, if you also have hot hands. And if your ears aren't perfect, this one had a little nick, that's okay, because the frosting will cover it up. And there we have it. All of his little wool is done. Now I'm actually gonna pop him in the fridge because my hands were really hot, and so the frosting's a little warm, so I'm just gonna pop this in the fridge. So he was in the fridge for a couple of minutes, and now we're gonna do his little facial features. So I have the brown frosting that I made, and I'm gonna very carefully make little eyelashes. Not bad. And now his little nose and mouth. And there we go, there's his little face. It's very rudimentary, it's not fancy. I think it looks really sweet. And now for the finishing touches. Just sprinkle that coconut grass all around him. So it looks like he's in a bed of grass. And I just garnished with a couple jelly beans. And there you have it, the quintessential Easter lamb cake.